Welcome to Catholic Views. I'm your host, Renee Kranz. On today's show, we have a very special guest. Deacon Omar Gutierrez from the Archdiocese of Omaha is coming. He'll be here on Zoom to talk to us about racism. And we're doing that because it was just Martin Luther King Jr. Day this past Monday. And I wanted to talk about it, about the Catholic perspective and the Catholic response, which Dr. Bergwald did this with him on Ignition a couple of years ago. I listened to it, and it was so great. I was like, we have to have him back to talk about it again, because surely not everybody heard it.
Well,
right.
Possibly, yeah.
So I have Dr. Bergwald here with me. We're going to do some Biblical Bites with Dr. B. But first, I want to just make sure that everybody knows coming up, we have the Gift of Hope concert, which supports the Lourdes Center here in the diocese, which they do a lot of grief support programs, counseling, and so on. And this is their big fundraiser for the year. So that is coming up February 11th at, let's see, I believe it starts at 7. I don't have a time here. I think it starts at 7. But it is at the Sioux Falls O'Gorman Performing Arts Center. So Ben Fuller is the star, the performer, yeah, the celebrity musician. He will be performing. He's a Christian singer, really, really good. From what I hear, I've never seen him. I listened to some of his stuff online a little bit, and he's kind of got a little bit of a country sound, a little bit.
Country rock.
Yeah, I think he'll be very well. He was here last year as the opening act and kind of stole the show. So.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, so I went last year with one of my daughters and a couple of her friends, and they loved Ben Fuller.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed him too. But the
girls,
the young teenagers, the 13-year-olds really liked Ben Fuller.
Bring your daughters, I guess.
Bring your daughters.
So you can get tickets for that at ccfesd.org. Ticket prices are, students are $20, adult general admission is $35, and you can do a patron seat, which really, really helps the fundraising. That's a preferred seating and a reception afterwards, and that is $60. So be sure to go to the website, ccfesd.org.
Ben Fuller has an amazing story. One of those like really profound conversion stories that I'm sure he'll share as part of his performance. So it was I think Unspoken was the main act last year, and they were great. Yep. But Ben Fuller, it's like, oh my gosh,
you just don't expect that of the opening act, and then he kind of blew him away.
Yeah, so. he was great. Yeah. So I would second the endorsement and recommendation to go, because it's a great event for a great cause.
Yes, a really great cause. They're doing some really great things around the diocese.
They are.
So, all right, Dr. B.
So I want to pick up where we left off last week, where I just talked briefly about the second reading, which is the semi-continuous reading from 1 Corinthians. So. The New Testament letters, so we get the Gospels, we have Acts, and then we have the rest of the New Testament documents, most of which, so everything basically after Acts, most of those numerically and in terms of page numbers, if you will, were written by St. Paul.
Right.
And St. Paul wrote these letters to churches usually that he had already visited or even established. Sometimes, in the case of the first and most important of his letters, St. Paul's letter to the Romans, he wrote it sort of in advance of his visit to them. Right. But the others were either written to churches or individuals, like Timothy, who he had mentored, if you will, and who he had ordained as a bishop. So St. Paul writes his letters to these individuals or to these communities for a variety of reasons. And I think it's just worth thinking a little bit about sort of the New Testament, the structure of the New Testament. These letters are written to these communities or individuals to support, encourage, and sometimes challenge or rebuke these communities for things that are going on. So in the case of his two letters to the Corinthians, and I mentioned just briefly last week, there seems to be some evidence that St. Paul had maybe written a third letter, that apparently wasn't inspired and didn't find its way into the Bible. But he wrote at least two, if not three, letters to the church in Corinth, a church that he had established. Corinth was in Greece, so mainland Europe. The Corinthians were, if you will, near and dear to his heart, but there was stuff going on that he really needed to challenge. So
even a place where that was established by an apostle,
right,
still had trouble.
Had troubles, right. And so one of the things, so just to be aware of kind of like when you're hearing about these letters, they're written for pastoral purposes to these various churches or individuals, especially in the case of Paul. So the reading that we hear about, or we hear at Mass today, is again from 2 Corinthians, and he's addressing the issue. I'm going to take time to quote, but the issue of factionalism. So he does say, each of you is saying, I belong to Paul, or I belong to Apollos, or I belong to Cephas, or I belong to Christ. Is Christ divided? Was Paul crucified for you? Or were you baptized in the name of Paul? And then he goes on from there. So I'm bringing this up because factionalism, as we can see here, has always been in the church, and in ways it's still in our church today. As Catholics, we are disciples of Jesus Christ. I can admire and have respect for various bishops, priests, popes, scholars, saints, and so on, but we're all called to follow Jesus Christ. So I think we have to tamp down on the factionalism and follow Jesus Christ.
And maybe have a little unity.
That's right.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. B.
You bet.